Uh, and recording is in progress. Perfect. I've been at Flex Radio. Geez, it's 5.5 years now. I sort of fell into the position. I came in to help with inside sales, and one thing led to another, and I get to do this fun job. So it's only taken a whole lifetime of living to finally get the job I truly like, and it's just a great place to be, and wonderful technology, wonderful people, and I know some of you've got probably a little interaction with them, and it's an exciting time in HF radio because we're starting to see a change in technology and how the technology works, and I'll mention that, and I'll we'll go forward from there. So. Uh, like just a warning, this could be an incredibly long presentation. I'm going to touch on a just a few bits, and but keep in mind now as we get away from the traditional, or on my desk, I've got my radio here, my amplifier here, all my feed lines here. We don't need to do that anymore. And I know that sounds incredibly foreign, and I'll probably mention it a couple times, but running Cat 5 closer to the tower is a lot easier and cheaper than running LMR 400 or LMR 600 or Heliax, and the end result is we have a lot more flexibility, and that's no pun on the name at all. It's just certainly true, and I've been reportedly impacted people's lives where they start to spend their kids' inheritance from time to time. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of you as kids had probably seen a beautiful station that looked like this, and I thought this was great. Then I looked closely and thought, that's another fake picture. It was fake news back then. There's not one feed line hanging off the back of this desk. And then, if this was your dad or your uncle or your grandfather, you might have gotten carried away and it might have looked like this. The good news is today it doesn't need to look like this to do all that. It can actually look like this. And we have, this is actually a complete contest station. And we can get away from the point of now putting radios on the desk, getting bigger desks, dedicating a whole room, or having to go out to the shed where the tower is that, well, we're in the Northeast, so not many of you are in a heated shed, but, as a kid, when I started out, and this was good, my ham shack was in a crawl space. It was only 4 feet high, and at 15 years old, as I was collecting this Heathkit equipment that people are giving me, no adults came in here. And I think that's why all of us at that age know how to house wire, because we needed more power in whatever our ham shack is. And if you look closely at this, and I'll talk about this again a bit more, I often get a lot of people saying, I want knobs. I don't want to use a computer. Well, you know what, guys, we're all getting blind. And I have a huge screen here. And just like all of you, I got 2 pairs of glasses sitting on my desk. Well, the good news is I can make that little tiny 7-inch display bigger. I can make the knobs bigger. I can make it easier to find. And I used to curse my ICOM 756 because it had those 5 knobs where there 4 or 5 knobs under the display. And they were incredibly critical knobs. They were mic gain and power. And I forgot what the other 3 were, CW speed probably. And I could never remember which one was what. And you sort of had to crawl under and stare under it with a flashlight in the middle of a contest at 3 in the morning when you were manually retuning your amplifier. But in all seriousness, we have the ability now to put waterfalls and pan adapters, which gives us great band visibility on a smaller display or a bigger display. In this person's case, he's got a knob, a flex control knob. Everybody says, "Oh, I don't want to use the mouse." Great, don't use your mouse. Use a knob. The VFO is probably the most thing we have our hands on. Well, I don't know, maybe control upshift in N1MM if we're just working through the DX spots. But he's got rotator control, he's got tuner control, he's got amplifier control, he's got micro amplifier control. He can manually adjust those knobs up and down a little bit if he wants to fine tune. And that's just where we're going. It is getting better. But if you really still want something on your desk, you can put something on your desk called a Maestro. And if some of you have followed us, you'll know we might have not shipped one for 2.5 years, but we're getting to that. But the Maestro gives you the ability, like in the old Motorola FM days, to put a control head on your desk. And this is a big display. This is an 8-inch display. The Maestro is not some little tiny thing that, this big around. It's like this, well, it's like this big. I have one right here. It sits under my monitor. And so I get the best of both worlds as an operator, where I get all this screen real estate here and I have my Maestro below me. And if I don't want to use the pan adapter waterfall here on the display, I can still use the knobs and have that information appear on my PC in something we called smart control. So it gives you a lot of, versatility or flexibility. But if you still need a radio that you need to haul out to field day, we have a radio that's got knobs on the front and a display on the front, 8-inch display. You hook up 12 volts, you hook up some feed line, and you're on the air. It doesn't need to be connected to the internet to work, which is that rumor sort of got out there. Very popular. We call these the M model. In this case, this is a Flex 6400M, very equivalent to, I'm sort of saying, a cross between a 7300 and a 7610 from ICOM type of thing, but it's a 2-slice radio. It's going to introduce about 3 new terms. And slice, well, slice is a receiver, so we'll talk about that, like A and B, like VFO A and B, but it's better. A little bit about Superhet. Superhet is an amazing technology. It's only been around for over a century, so I guess it was pretty rock solid. But it comes with it solved a lot of problems in the day, but it came with some trade-offs. One of the most difficult problems was all the mixing and smearing that happened when you mixed RF signals together. This is why it's called a super heterodyne. And if you remember from radio school, when you mix 2 frequencies together, you get the sum and the difference, the original and your mixing frequency. You got 4 frequencies that are spewing out, and you want to get to 1. And that's why we had triple and quad conversion radios in the 70s, 80s, 90s, because it was all about getting rid of those mixed frequencies. But when you mix frequencies, you also get noise. And I'm going to cautiously say this, so please don't take this a long way. When we bench test radios for performance, like our MDR, we do it on a bench with 1 frequency in the passband. And that gives us some pretty good numbers. There's a whole video you can watch later that when you go to a direct sampling world, the more frequencies you have in the passband, the better direct sampling works. It sort of doesn't make any sense, but Gerald Youngblood, the founder of FlexRadio, has a great video online. I think I have it in the stack of information I'm going to share with you, where you can go watch. He was a presentation he did in Germany at Friedrichshafen, I believe, and he explains why multiple frequencies in a passband of a direct sampling radio are actually beneficial, and the math to prove it. So I don't want the term SDR to scare anybody. It's been around for quite a while, actually, software defined radio. And I guarantee, and usually I have a camera in the crowd, so I can't see any of you, but I want someone to put up your hand if you don't own an SDR radio of any way, shape, or form. And somebody let me know how many hands are up.
It's like everybody has one.
The trick question, by the way. Okay, the only person that can probably correctly put up their hand is somebody that does not own a cell phone. So that's why these don't look like your Motorola brick phones anymore, because they're software-defined technology. As we made the move from spark gap to tubes to semiconductors to integrated circuits, we now compress that all, and we handle the raw RF. We digitize it, which means we turn it from analog, Joe Welsh's favorite mode, into, if you read QST this month, into digital, and we do that at 16 bits. The direct sampling. So what do we do in direct sampling that's different? Well, they cover the whole, or Flex radios cover the entire HF spectrum. So we digitize 100% of the time at 16 bits from 30 kilohertz all the way to 54 megahertz, and a bit more in the 6700 radio. And the advantage of that is many, but one of them is I can have different receivers anywhere in that spectrum at the same time, either on the same or different antenna. There's a little bit of differentiation here, but it's not a trick. A Flex 6400 or a Flex 6300, if you've heard of those models, or the 6500, have the ability, have one antenna. You can only use one antenna at the same time. And so, but we digitize that whole thing. So imagine you had a station hooked up to a vertical like an HF6V, you know what? You can actually you can use that sort of as an SO2R station, enough anyway, because we're listening and we're digitizing the entire spectrum, or at the same time. So I can be on, as I jokingly say, you can be listening to a baseball game on AM broadcast at the same time that you might be listening to 6 meters if your antennas could support it. Software defined also gives us the ability to protect a radio and make it future proof. I have friends that contest still with a Flex 6300, which came out about 2012. And I can't think of, and it runs current software, and I can't think of any other radio that I bought over 10 years ago that's still current. And I have a few, and they still work fine, but they're not current. And if we ever, and if and when we come up with no features or functionalities or modes, it's a software change. It's not new hardware. I'm going to say that with a grain of salt because there will always be some sort of caveat where that may not be able to be pulled off. But generalistically, that's incredibly true. And we also get an incredibly good dynamic range. And to really show this, and I should grab some screenshots, but if you run FT8, if you're an FT8 operator, it's just using it as a great example, and you're using a super het radio, loud signals will drown out the weaker signals. This is often why they tell you to turn off the automatic gain control. Not quite the same in a software-defined radio where you're not necessarily affected by weak and loud signals being side by side. And in case of point, I was running an RTTY contest a couple of years ago. I live in Toronto. I'm a 80-meter stone's throw from K3LR. Okay, they're over Lake Ontario, then over Lake Erie, but they're really not that far away, you know, for 9 o'clock in the winter on an RTTY contest. And I can see them, they're running like they do, and I'm about, I don't know, 400 or 500, half a kilohertz down, and I am printing perfectly some weak guy in South America in RTTY, and I can barely see him on the waterfall, but I have no problem copying. And that's where the dynamic range part comes in, your ability to, you know, see or hear from a broad range of spectrums. And if you're a photographer, you know all about that. Film has, or digital cameras had an okay dynamic range. Film had a okay dynamic range, but your eyeballs have a huge dynamic range. The ability for me to look out the window beside me and see a bookcase and read the titles on the bookcase and not have the outside overexposed. That's sort of the same idea if you're not quite sure what dynamic range is all about. So I did mention a spectral capture unit, and some radios have one and some have two. And essentially that's the receiver. And you need at least one, and we only have radios with two. I guess we could build them with 2 or 4, but anyway. And so this Flex 6300, the 6400, 6500 have one spectral capture unit, and the 6600 and the 6700 have 2. Well, why do I need 2? Well, the 6600 and the 6700 are full-blown SO2R radios right out of the box. You do not need to buy any additional hardware. I have a video you guys can look at later of me running I'm CQing on 40 while I'm poking around on 20 at full, about 1500 watts. And my 40 meter V is 2 feet underneath my stepper antenna, and I don't even hear myself till I get to within about 20 or 30 kilohertz of the full second harmonic. Not even the noise floor going up and down, because the 6600 has built-in about 50 dB band isolation. 64 has about 30 dB band isolation. So these are all really good numbers. We've talked about the spectrum. My screen's over here, I keep looking at. We talked about the spectrum and how much we listen to and the importance of the spectral capture unit. So how do we see all that? Well, there's clients. The client's the part that the protein unit, that's us, use. It's Smart SDR for Windows. It's Smart SDR for Mac. It's Smart SDR for iOS. It's Dog Park SDR for Mac. And there's the Maestro, which I showed you. Those are clients that all connect to the radio. That gives us our ability to change frequency bands, all that normal button stuff. And here's just a shot of some of the typical radio clients. And there's links here when I share the presentation later, or probably Monday, that you can go follow up and learn more about this. Now let's talk about one or two spectral capture units. You'll notice here, this radio, blue is receive antenna, red is transmit antenna. I have a second slicer receiver open over here. It's using the same antenna at the same time. And we have the upper half of the display. This is a Maestro or an M model display, a pen adapter and a waterfall on 20. And if we look down here, this is on 40. And by the way, my amplifier's connected and I have all my amplifier health here as well. And that's a one spectral capture unit radio where we can do, I just do it all on one antenna. If I wanted to transmit on, let's see, where's my focus here? It's on 20 meters, the TX is here. I would just, on the Maestro, I push the TX button and I'm transmitting over here. And believe it or not, I could have a second, this is going to sound a bit confusing, a different antenna as my transmit antenna and a common receive antenna on a single spectral capture unit radio. Because when I switch to transmit, push the foot to talk, push to talk switch, the foot to talk switch, push to talk switch, the antenna will change. But in a two spectral capture unit radio, here's the same setup. You'll notice this says as antenna 2 and antenna 1. So I'm probably on a tri-bander here and maybe a 40 meter V here. Works very well. If you happen to be into satellite work, you can hook up two transmitters and have a satellite QSO. Satellite guys like to listen to their downlink. So they can run full duplex. Actually, every radio can run full duplex, meaning I can be listening and transmitting on the same time. Incredible tool if you want to tune your own transmit audio. Never had a radio that would do that before. Pretty powerful. All the 6,000 radios, which are what we ship today, which are the 64 and the 66, and we've stopped shipping the 6700 due to parts availability. Does that mean there's a replacement coming? Well, probably. I'm not pre-announcing anything, but you know, it is something that needs to be resolved. These to the 6700. They are, not my words, contest grade receivers. They don't fall apart in a contest. They are all able to be used remotely. And something else I haven't yet mentioned called multiflex, but I'll bring that up later, which is two users using the same radio at the same time. They all have this incredibly powerful tool called controlled envelope single sideband, CESSB. There is a QEX article on it, but essentially we're able to drive, it's a compressor, but it's at the RF level. And a compressor is used to fill the RF envelope to full power. And it's about a 3 dB improvement. I think it's 2.8. It's developed by Dave Hirschberger, W9GR. And I use it all the time. And as a contester, it's incredibly important at the low band frequencies because, you know, what's the differentiator for most of us on 80 meters? The best that many of us can do is an 80 meter dipole. Some of us could probably do a little better, but if we can, and then we toss the amplifier in, but if we can get another 3 dB of transmit power out during CQ Worldwide SSB, which I call a slugfest on a good day, then, you know, it might make a differentiator in being heard in that pileup. And this is the classic chart. I've highlighted some of the key differences, the spectral capture units, the number of slices, the receivers, and the bandpass filter differences in as well. Again, all of them have the ability to hook up receiving antennas as well, and for beverages or loops or whatever. So I did talk already about controlled envelope single sideband, but when you get to the slide from the PDF I'll show you, you can go click on it. You can read the QAX article, you can look at the article and there was something else, both of these as well. This video is about Dave talking about it and how it works if you want to get into the details and hear from the author. So let's talk about the amplifier that goes with it. When 403A builds the amplifier for us called the Power Genia XL, and you're going to hear this term a couple of times, it's also full duplex, meaning it's got enough switching and filters in it that I can transmit all the way through it while I'm receiving on a different band. It supports a ton of OEM radios. It doesn't have to be a FlexRadio. And it has something called MEFA, the ability for us to change the bias to become more efficient. And in my case, because I am remote, I like to keep the heat down in the box. So that's really helpful. And something called the harmonic dummy load. Now, no other HF amplifier I know of has something called our harmonic dummy load. And think about what happens when we amplify an HF signal. Let's take a signal at 20 meters. So if you amplify that, you're going to get a second harmonic at 10 meters at 28 megs, correct? And it's pretty healthy. It's not a trivial signal. And normally in every other amplifier, by Ameritron or MFJ or even ACOM or whatever, that RF energy hits the low pass filter as it should to prevent it from going out on the air, because the FCC sort of doesn't like that. And what happens to that energy? Well, essentially, it gets reflected and it ends up bounding its way back into the power amplifier. And this can contribute to IMD products, intermodulation distortion. It can affect your signal quality. But in the Power Genius XL, there is essentially a diplex or a high and a low pass filter. The low pass filter allows the energy for 20 meters to go out to the antenna, but the high pass, the 28 meg or the second, third, fourth harmonic, is actually siphoned off and sent to a harmonic dummy load in the amplifier. Now, how much energy can that be? Well, I'll tell you what, it's a 400-watt dummy load. It gets hot. It's a lot of energy. And so that's pretty critical. And you've got complete band isolation, as I mentioned. Just let me grab a drink here. The Tuner Genius, which marries with the amplifier, comes in two different models. But following on to the SO2R type of configuration, it will also marry right up to the amplifiers I said, so that you can run full SO2R. It'll handle up to a 10-to-1 SWR. It actually supports OEM radios as well. And you can read through all this. It's LAN controlled like the amplifier. It could be remotely controlled. 100% duty cycle, ICAS duty cycle. It's got memories and et cetera, et cetera. So it also comes in a what we call a 1x3 model, which allows you to hook up 3 antennas to a single port. And then you sort of give up the SO2R full duplex part, but if that's maybe something you may or may not ever use. So I often get asked, what about OEM radios? How do they play? So if you will look closely at this, we've got your ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, Elecraft radio here. And in any other amplifier world, we generally run an RS-232 cable over to the hardware, to the amplifier. And fortunately today, newer radios have 2 CAT interfaces. We've got the traditional RS-232 cable, but not only that, there's a USB port which gives you second CAT control. So that's great now because your computer can connect to the radio for N1MM or whatever your logging program is, but we can also send the band information right to the amplifier. And thanks to improvements by 403A, we can configure this so that the Tuner Genius gets its keying or its amplifier information, its band information from the amplifier over the LAN or the Ethernet. And this is why the LAN and the ham shack today is becoming such a critical thing. And if you guys are sitting at home, I'd say, look around your ham shack. How many LAN cables do you have running around? And it's growing. I actually have a full, sadly, 24 port switch over there. And I look at it and I go, the heck do I have everything plugged into? But got about 2/3 of it populated with different things. Not all ham radio, but when it turns into a man cave, you start hooking up more and more stuff. So time for show and tell. I have this video here of how things play. So you guys have a listen. And you know what? I forgot to share audio. So let me just stop this and I've got to come back in and no problem. All right. Almost always make that mistake. Sure. And here we go. Hey, good day. It's Mike from FlexRadio, and I want to take a quick walk through. Why did that? None of these are ever quick. Correctly, so bear with me. This is the longer video. You know what? Rather than waste your time, we will escape out of that. Go back to the slide deck, and you guys can watch this later. That played correctly. The other side. All right. Moving on. So what about, I often get asked about what do we do with all those slices? Well, this is a Flex 6600 working Charlie Yankee 0 Sierra. I know probably most of you worked him. It was pretty convenient for us, for me here in Toronto. He's running CW on 160 on, and this slice, this is called a slice flag, is on his transmit frequency. I can, I've got my transmitter set up over here. I've got a skimmer running. I'm using SDC connector, which interfaces directly to Flex radios. And we can see the skimmer spots starting up, and I'm
Mike, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
We're only seeing a small version of your screen. Can you make it full screen?
Yeah, let me stop that again. Because, oh, I see what's happened. Just a minute. Thanks for interrupting.
Okay.
Better?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, and I've got to stop it one more time and fix what I did. All right, now we're good. Yeah, it's hard. I can't see what I'm sending, so I don't know when it's wrong. All right, so starting on again, we have the receive slice here. There's Charlie Yankee 0 Sierra. I've got my transmit slice over here because he's running split, and I've got a skimmer running, which gets the IQ data right from the radio. We send it out. And that's why we're seeing skimmer spots. And I said most of you probably know what a skimmer is. The cool thing is, because I'm on a 6600, I can bring up a third slice in diversity mode. So if you look, remember I said blue was receiving antennas? I've got my RX antenna on my A port plus the primary 160 antenna on the, and these run in the left and right ear. And a long time ago, I had a university or my college prof tell me that in radio school that the brain is a hugely powerful digital signal processor, even back then. And I've played with beam steering and all the computer generated stuff. I still think my brain does a better job, but it's fun to listen to a signal dance around, and the biggest antenna is not always the better signal to noise ratio. And so you hear the CW dance all over. It's pretty cool. So it's something you can do in the 6600. All right. This one worked. So we're just a little demonstration of a dynamic range type of thing and not being affected by some QRM. While this plays, this is a POTA station right here. He's not very strong. And we've got a fairly loud signal here. But while this is going on, I want you to watch the S meter, and you can see how strong he is. So I've got a Parks on the Air station here right beside a guy that's splattering. Let's have a listen. With a little hard to hear. He's weak. Okay, I'm going to narrow down my filter to 2.4. We're now not going to hear this guy splattering as much.
Have a good one. This is KA4KOE, Parks on the Air.
Now, watch what happens. I have a 2.1 kilohertz filter, and I'm going to add some receive EQ as he's talking. And of course, we have some lightning or some static, but because we've elevated the receive EQ here, it makes it easier to listen to.
Thank you for Massachusetts. Have a good one.
One other trick we can do is we can add a tracking notch filter to this guy called a right here, which is a big ugly notch filter. Going to make it very deep. Now that doesn't give us the result we necessarily want, so we can move it over a bit and get rid of some of his, and use that to help notch out some of that guy's signal above. And the nice thing about a tracking notch filter is if I move my VFO, the notch filter does not move. Pretty cool. And that's some of the power of the filtering on a Flex radio. as well. We'll turn off the tracking notch.
All right, stopping Quebec Bravo.
I tend to use the PC screen for presentations just because it's a better tool. So how does this all hook together? Well, it's about as complicated as hooking up your RAPI. The radio plugs into your LAN by a LAN cable. Older diagram, but it still applies for every radio today. It connects to your router, which is the brains of your internet in your house. It's the traffic cop. Computer hooks it, just plugs into your LAN, and Smart SDR could be running on a laptop as well, and you can access it by Wi-Fi. The radio does work significantly better by hardware cabling. I've got a bit of a career in Wi-Fi communications, and simply put, I think Wi-Fi is evil. It sort of works until it doesn't. It works fine for movies and buffering, but when you get into real-time communications like voice over IP phone calls or high-speed CW, we can't deal with more than 100 millisecond delay, and that's when Wi-Fi can be a little flaky. Maybe it'll get fixed, but whatever. And I have lost my mouse. It's one of those days. And the beauty now is, I mentioned earlier, we're not stuck with one computer connected to one radio, connected to one feed line, and one operator, one user. We can now share that information around. And just a simple example with the radio connected to a network switch, we've got a Maestro with the headset on and user. You can have a logging PC here or a different user, maybe running multiflex and digital programs and a third computer if you wanted to. All this, when you figure it out and go, I don't have to put everything in one computer, or if you want, you can. This is really the beauty of now moving everything to what's called TCP/IP communications, and as well, because it gives us that flexibility to expand. Now, I had mentioned multiflex a few times. Multiflex is the ability for two users to use the same radio at the same time, be anywhere in the spectrum, and then they fight over the transmitter type of thing. Works really well with clubs. I know many clubs now that have 2 or 3 flex radios in their clubhouse. They can support a couple of different people. They can contest on the same radio. It takes a little bit of coordination, but that's what multiflex is all about. And the clients don't have to be the same. You can mix and match, and it's also a great training aid for new people, so again, pretty slick and powerful. One of the noise blankers, noise mitigation today is a big deal, and we're going to see more and more improvements in noise mitigation. Here's a quick example of here at my QTH in Toronto. I have 500 kV lines behind me, about 300 meters that way, and they had a bad insulator on them. And credit to Ontario Hydro, I went out and I could hear it. It was a day like today. It's sort of foggy out today, and I could hear it arcing. So I went for a walk and found it and phoned. They have a trouble line, and I phoned Ontario Hydro and I said, hey, this insulator's arcing. And it was like a Monday or something, and the guy drove down from the office 2 hours away in a place called Peterborough and met me there, and he goes, yeah, looked at it. Now, this was the week before CQ Worldwide. We had just moved into this area, and he says, yeah, we'll have to replace that insulator. And I went, this week? And these are big insulators. It was a helicopter job when they finally did it. But they did do it. It was about 6 months later, and now that noise isn't that bad. Most of the noise I hear, and I think that we all hear in our urban areas, we blame on plasma TVs, but if you look around, most of the noise is in our own houses. It's every wall cube, every wire you've got connected to a radio. And I want to thank, and I meant to pull up his name, the author of the choke document that's been around for 10 or 12 years. It became my Bible in choking out receiving noise. So for the person that wrote that, thank you. For me, I don't know how many hundreds of times I've recommended that PDF document on chokes. Anyway, let's have a listen to what the noise sounds like. Case in point, any recordings I do on the low bands, it's really hard to find a QSO to record that somebody's not talking about their meds. So anyway, this one's some of mine still have some entertainment to it.
WB2KAO here. Good morning, Barry. And
Now WB2KAO, we can barely hear. Let me turn the blanker back on.
Yeah, real good, Barry. Just got off the bike, and I thought, well, let me check in with you here for a minute before I go up and get in the shower. We got quite a bit of
So that gives you an idea of the wide noise blanker, which samples a very broad swath of the HF spectrum, looking for repetitive noise, and essentially inverts it and takes it out so we can hear it, simply put. It's a very specialized type of blanker. Another screen here, we've got, if you've never used a skimmer when working a pileup, you're missing something. And I'm sure we've got people in the audience that use it quite a bit. But the advantage of this awareness of what's going on, and in my case, STC skimmer, I'm listening to VP6A here, and somebody called him, sent him a 599. The skimmer software popped up. Hey, he's right there, and that's where, of course, I put my transmitter and worked him like a call or two later. So, pretty good. Fortunately, the HF vendors, there's something called the Clean Signal Initiative, and we're getting a lot of push into adaptive pre-distortion. I'm going to get asked when you're going to deliver that, and so we actually do have it working. And I guess ICOM just announced it, or just sort of released it in Japan this week, though I haven't seen anything from of how well it's working. They've done some pretty cool stuff with it, but if you're ever watching a signal in a waterfall, all this is not receiver overload. This is a person. I know what radio is using and what amplifier. It's a net control station. He's overdriving the radio, and please just watch your mic gain. That's what the mic ALC controls for. But he's watching his watt meter, and then he's sending that into an amplifier, and it's just making it worse. So we're on 14247. He's probably splattering. He's an upper sideband, so he's splattering down at least 7 kilohertz, and he's probably going the same up. It's just pretty noisy, and a good signal, if you've never looked at a waterfall before, is nice vertical. This guy's probably traditional radio. It's got a little bit of shooting over top, but it's not bad. You'd probably never even hear it, but yeah, it's certainly important. Quick video on working split. I didn't have a skimmer running, but just by watching a waterfall, I could see where 8 Quebec 7 Delta X-ray was calling CQ and people answering him. As I say in the video, this was after the pileup thinned out, and I had worked him just before this. We have some DX here on 15 meters, and this is 8 Quebec 7 Delta X-ray. I have my packet cluster spot there. We can see him calling, and we can see people answering now. The pileup's thinned out a bit, but you can see it'd be easier for him to work because there's not many people calling him back. Now, granted, he's half a world away, and sometimes I can't hear everybody calling him, but I got him on the second call sheerly by watching him call and waiting for and seeing where people are answering him. So let's have a listen. And if we watch, we can see this guy's calling too often because he's doubling with him. Eventually he may hear him if 8 Quebec 7 Delta X-ray's receiver is here, which is up about 1500 hertz. Now we don't see the next guy replying, which is unfortunate, but you get the idea. If they reply, you'll see them. As an example, if someone replied, if this was the guy he was working, we could just double click our mouse and move over there and have a listen. And we could set this up in stereo so that we'd have the DXpedition on the left and maybe the masses on the right. So let's go back, see if he actually gets this guy. There you go. And if I was me, I would call right here because I know that's where his receiver is. That's the power of working a DXpedition using a waterfall. Now, I know you guys all live in the Northeast, so you're no stranger to static crashes. And having your favorite line, if you're drag chewing on 80, is sorry, the static crash took you out. We have a fast attack AGC. that works incredibly well. And you'll see as we as I play this video with this, these horizontal bars, each one of these is a lightning strike, and there's timestamps on it. So we're getting one about every 2.5, 3 seconds. Of course, the minute I go to record, we get a pause. But just have a quick listen, and you can hear that you can still maintain a pretty good QSO without issue. And remember I said, recording low band QSOs always has some entertainment.
See it, I'm about here. In fact, I'm right there. That little green dot is my lightning map receiver. And here's the storm right over Lake Huron coming into Georgian Bay. And you can see a bit of stuff going on here. So we'll get rid of that. So let's turn on the audio, and I want you to just listen to what we're hearing here. Okay. My AGCT for 80 meters, let's see, is way too high. Let me turn off my audio. Or we'll turn this down. If I adjust my AGCT just down, you'll notice it gets really quiet. But you go, I'm not going to be able to hear anything. Let me turn this. No, I'm going to turn this level up to normal level. And we hear that click. And that's the Fast Attacks Dual AGC. Click on, click off. I'm at medium, by the way, not at fast, not at slow. So how does that translate if you want to listen to a couple of guys? There's a net here on 3755.
1718. Anyway, the one went into the silo, died from the gas. The other one went into, seen his brother floundering there, went in and he died too.
So you'll notice we can hear, that's my buddy Chad, speaking, just rag chewing about whatever. And plain as day, sort of like the winter on a quiet day. Yeah, it's not perfect, but man, it's easy to listen to.
Similar story. Silos are nothing to mess with. Matter of fact, a lot of people put signs on the doors, especially up high, not to get in there. And that's a shame. Thanks for sharing that with everyone. It's VE2HOG, and he's a farmer, so he knows what's going on. This is the OnTARS net. Anybody like to check in before I have to check?
And I don't mention that AGCT is, while we have an RF gain slider, AGCT is setting the gain correctly into the ADC, the analog to digital converter or type of thing. It's got an optimum place it needs to be, and that's what I was adjusting, type of thing. I don't know if anybody noticed as well. You probably saw, if you saw this level meter bouncing up and down, that was the mic on the radio. I'm going, wait a minute, why is that level meter moving while I'm going to receive? Well, you know what? That's a design feature. It actually allows you to set your mic gain without putting the radio in transmit, which is such a concept. But yeah, we do that. Okay, a few more things. We're almost done. Some of the easiest. This is the easiest radio to set up if you want to consider doing anything to do with remote. And I say that based on a number of things, but most importantly is I own the remote operation forum at Dayton. And last Dayton, I looked really hard at all of the remote ways to do things. And I was trying to be vendor agnostic and say, they all work really well, but every other one to this day requires you to have some networking knowledge, highly recommended that you be using a VPN for security. And it's not truly plug and play. Setting up a FlexRadio for remote operation is as simple as logging into your Gmail account for the first time or something similar. So you don't need to do VPNs or Dyn DNS or network experience. It just actually works. And that's becoming, as you've realized maybe, that remote operating is becoming incredibly mainstream, from even to the point of DXpeditions and George Wallner's group. They go out in this beautiful boat. They sit out here in the boat, they wheel their beast onto the shore, they run up some antennas, and everybody goes back to the boat and operate. And as George says, you want to get your queue rate up, you feed them hot food, you keep them dry, and give them a real toilet to use and a shower. And not only that, though, he's getting permission to islands to operate, because you're not bringing 20 people to an island. You've got to deal with latrines and food and garbage and footprints, and they like that. It's minimal impact. So we're going to see, I don't know, how many has he done now? Half a dozen type of thing. And this stuff works. Now, love it or hate it. So they run, I think, about 900 meg link back and forth. But now, thanks to Starlink, they've been able to offload their FT8 operations to people who are not on the boat, and they run it remotely from different parts of the world. Do we care? No. That's the way we're going. I don't care. I need the island. I need the entity. I used to think, though, that to be an entity, it had to support a McDonald's, but nobody listened to me on that one. I think there was an article in QSD of 100 years ago. We did talk about SO2R, but I'm going to be quick on this. If you built an SO2R station today, single operator 2 radio, it probably looks like this. And you've got 2 radios, 2 amplifiers, and you double up everything. If you want to build one in the Flex world today, and I'm going to show you all the hardware with all the cabling other than the DC power cables. You've got like a Flex 6600. This could actually be 2 different radios. It could be 2 Flex radios. It could be 2 OEM radios. You've got the amplifier, the tuner, and a 8x2 or a 2x8 antenna switch, and they all talk together over the LAN to do things and switch correctly. In the setup, I can set up a full SO2R station in 10 minutes. And Yuri V3DZ is a good friend of mine, and I poke fun of him when he used to go to Zone 2. And he would spend all day getting SO2R running. Anyway, I never quite convinced him to say, just buy into this for one weekend, but that's I'm Ukrainian. I can say that the stubborn Ukrainian he is. I get it. So, but what an operator. But this is, and when you get away from this and go to this, you eliminate a whole bunch of wires connected to your computer and your radio. And each one of those is an antenna. RF isn't fussy. And you start to dump out more common mode currents. Your noise floor starts to go down. You start to hear more. And then lastly, if you've got any satellite operators, I think we're about done. Just a quick running full duplex on a FlexRadio. In fact, I was doing this about 10 minutes before I jumped in on RS-44, which is a great high altitude satellite. And I'm using 2 transmitters at the same time. And the screen's inverted, but all my satellite equipment's here. There's my transverters, there's VHF and UHF, and my radio. And I actually, believe it or not, worked 2 moon mount stations last week, just with my satellite station that I have here. Even my wife walked in as I said, holy expletive, I worked him. You heard me. And that was even 49 years in the hobby, I'm still getting firsts. So that was pretty cool.
And, I guess it's something you need to do, but boy, you hate to do it.
Oh, there goes that new radio, Peter.
Probably about 5, 6 of them, Jeff, over.
Roger that. And I was just thinking, I'm doing a lot of part-time work, and I'm thinking maybe I could afford that 7300. But with the roof coming, no, not this year.
Okay. I'm surprised you don't have one already.
I've got an old IC7410 that I really like, and I've got a 99180 here, and that's just super affordable.
Alrighty, SDR overload. We've seen this in some OEM radios today where you have to be very conscious of the gain. Not in a Flex radio. It's pretty much described here by Gerald. The video where he talks through it is below, underneath, what did he say? Plus 62 dBm. And that's a pretty strong signal type of thing. And we, I think, are the only radio that truly pops up with a big message, front end overload. And the only time I've ever seen it was we had a customer that literally lived across the street from an AM broadcast station that was a gazillion watts. And he wanted a way to bypass the pop-up message. Now I can generate it at my station because I have a couple of radios there. On my 6500 will show the auto overload message if I'm running full RTTY power, but it doesn't hurt anything. It's pretty well protected. And we talked about dynamic range. We talked about the automatic gain control and a couple of gain changers. Just summarizing, we have this amazing filtering, which you saw. You can have multiple main receivers, the wide noise blanker, controlled envelope, single sideband. Don't buy a radio today without it. You're just giving away power. We have this amazing dynamic range for digital performance, the built-in bandpass filters, multi-flex. I used to have a slide showing me throwing all those digital adapters, you know, the rig experts and whatever, in the trash, because you don't need any more of those. Simple remoting. And for any geeky guys that program stuff, you want to write your own client, the communication over the LAN to the radio for client control is in plain text. You can easily figure it out. And if you wanted to write, I'll answer this now. Okay, where's support for Android or Linux? Well, I'll be blunt, we don't have the time to write it right now. But if somebody wants to write it, we'd be glad to help them. And it's not hard. And a couple of people have started. And I've just come to the conclusion there's no software developers that are on HF radio that are ham operators type of thing. And that's all about the API. I'm sure that's not true, but we would certainly love to see them get in there. And you know what? We have skipped into an extra slide that we are, there we go. And if you want to find us, here we are. All the links and stuff. We actually do answer the phone. We're happy to talk ham radio. The guys answering the phones, like myself and Andy VA3CW and Dave WO2X, all are active. So I'll be honest, sometimes you can't get us on the phone because we're working a de-expedition. It's great working at it Wednesday at 1 o'clock when I used to be at work. We have a ton of videos and training videos and a little bit more sales pitch. If you're thinking of trading in something, we take trades. We have a 30-day return policy. If you don't like the radio, send it back. We give your money back, type of thing. What else have I got in there? Tier warranty, tech support, that's staff that are able to answer questions for you. And I'm sure I've missed 100 different things, but I said there's a lot of stuff to go over. And that's how you get hold of me. And you don't need to take pictures because you'll get a PDF of this.
Yeah, I'll post it on our .io site.
Yep, if you don't mind, in a private area would be appreciated. But let me stop sharing.
Okay, yep. Any questions for Mike?
I've got one.
Okay.
Hi, Mike. It's Dave K1ZZ. Will Flex be handling Ronco's new headset?
Yes. This one? Yep. I've had it for a while actually, and really comfortable. I think he's done a great design with it. And I don't know when we're bringing it in. It's still a month out maybe because we were just settling on it. You know, you have to have contracts in place for everything. So that has to be done, or was in process.
All right,
It's
anybody else?
It's also got Bluetooth. Not for our stuff, because we don't do Bluetooth. Nobody's going to ask me about the Maestro? We're working on it.
Suppose we have one coming. We'll see if it shows up.
It's almost done. We still have to, we're delayed still. I can't share anymore. There's a ton of work happening on it. And if you've ever developed a product to try to get it out the door, it's amazing what'll trip you up.
I'm particularly interested in it because working with some students at the elementary and middle school level, and the educators in the group really feel like having a real live box with knobs is important. We're looking forward to it.
Sure. Yeah, I understand fully.
All right, Mike, I think that pretty much wraps the questions here. I want to thank you again for taking the time to do this on a Sunday. And I think it was well received. Everybody?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for a pleasure to be here. I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me. So have a great day.
Hey.
Merry Christmas or season greetings or whatever, whatever you observe. But I'll say Merry Christmas. So.
All right, Mike.
7-3,
All right.
everybody.
73.